Okay, continuing this conversation on trade, we're watching markets right now that are still higher, but nonetheless a little lower amid all the trade news. The Dow is still up 123, which ain't bad. 25,167 the level there. S&P still up almost 5 points. Here with more, Gordon Chang, author of The Coming Collapse of China, and Stifel chief economist Lindsey Piegza. Good to see you both. Gordon, starting with you here. The farm subsidies. That's a lot of money that he's going to be giving farmers to sort of help offset some of the tariff issues. Is that going to be enough to sort of carry them through? I mean, you know, China, as you and I have discussed many times before, is playing for the long haul. And, you know, we only have people in office for a few years at a time.
Sure, but this is just a short-term response, and we could have other responses in the future. You know, these tariffs that are being imposed, we all talk about trade war, but these tariffs are being imposed to stop Chinese intellectual property theft. And we've got to do something about it. And I know that various sectors of the U.S. economy are going to get hurt. But the question for people, you know, who say we don't want these tariffs is, what do you do about the theft of hundreds of billions of dollars a year? Now, you can talk about other things, but those other things are basically either ineffective or more drastic than the tariffs. So these tariffs are like a start to see if the Chinese will back down, will stop thieving. But, you know, at this point, we're going to have to continue this because we don't really have an alternative.
You know, Lindsey, the Chinese have been doing this for years. We've allowed them to do it for years. You heard the president say over and over again, gosh, you know, nobody bothered dealing with this before. Let me ask you, where's the WTO in all this? Why haven't they dealt with it?
Well, remember, after the tariffs were implemented, we did hear that China, even Mexico, was garnering formal complaints that they were going to submit to the WTO. But that does take quite a process, quite an extended period of time. So I very doubt that we're going to hear from international regulatory agencies sticking their nose in this dispute.
Even though they should actually police this, right? I mean, the WTO exists to make sure that this stuff doesn't happen. You can't just blatantly steal from another country.
Part of the Trump administration's frustration that the WTO is really relying on very antiquated agreements, antiquated language that may not be applicable to the present situation. And so I think part of that is the motivation for the Trump administration to get these trade agreements updated and really question whether or not we should be in the WTO. I think he's right on this. I'm just going to say it, you know, and you all know I call it like it is. Gordon, he's right on the mark on this, because the idea that they've been able to steal all this intellectual property, I mean, granted, as a free market, red-blooded American capitalist, I would love to see the markets at work and American companies to say, look, we don't want to be there. We don't want to be there because they're stealing our stuff. But the reality is these CEOs only care about earnings for that quarter, for that year, for 2-3 years out. And this is a long-term issue that we're facing. You steal our technology today, 10 years from now, you're in the driver's seat.
Yeah, this is existential when it comes to the economy, because increasingly, Trish, we've got an innovation-based economy. And if we cannot commercialize the products of our innovation, then we don't have very much of an economy. We start to look like a third world economy selling agricultural products and handicrafts. Now, those are important, but nonetheless, we do need the Googles and the Amazons and the Qualcomms and all the rest of this, because when we look at the future is going to be determined by who controls 5G communications, artificial intelligence, quantum communications, and a few other things. So
that's where they want to excel.
And that's China's Made in 2025 program, which is one big WTO violation. And, you know, countries have yet to deal with the implications of what Beijing is doing.
Lindsey, how do you think about this as an economist, though? Because, you read the econ textbooks, right, in school, and you learn that trade is good and people benefit from trade and can have a better lifestyle and trade makes sense. But, you know, that's assuming that the rules are fair. And the world in which now we live, the rules are no longer fair. And, you know, if China charges 25% on something we send them when we only charge 2%, it's not fair.
Absolutely. And broadly speaking, when we talk about restricting access to global markets, this will have a negative implication for the U.S. economy. Slowing job creation, slowing income growth, that will be the near-term impact. But the long-term goal is, as we just heard, trying to get to that level playing field. But that pathway to that end goal will be very painful. So the question is, can the Trump administration step in and provide some sort of subsidy, some sort of pain relief for those that are being hit the hardest? What he's proposed thus far will help mitigate. Well, it will, but in the near term, the question is, how long will this pathway to that end game go? Are we talking years? Are we talking decades? We don't know. And it's going to be very difficult for the administration to stabilize the market.
I don't think this administration is going to
be
too happy if it goes on. And I would imagine, Gordon, that they will apply more and more and more pressure because you want to end this faster. Yeah. You want to end this soon. You don't want to prolong it.
We have overwhelming leverage when it comes to China right now. We're growing 4-ish. They're in reality growing 2-ish. They're heading to a systemic debt crisis. We got a stable economy. And so you look at all of these, and, you know, the Chinese are starting to understand they cannot win a sustained campaign against the United States.
They can't. We are their biggest customer. If we say we're not buying any more stuff, guess what? They don't have as big a market to sell it to.
Well, they certainly don't. And you know, the problem right now is that there is a trade outlaw at the center of global commerce. A decision was made in the 1990s to try to have all of these advantages for China because we were trying to integrate them into the international system. And that's why we agreed to only 2.5% tariffs when they have 25% tariffs on the same items. You know, this was a long time ago, though. This was a fundamental mistake that Trump has got to deal with, and it's going to be painful for us.
Yep. Well, better now when we can deal with it.
Absolutely.
We can.
Absolutely.
And, you know, when our kids are grown and we are no longer the economy because China has taken over that spot. Gordon, Lindsey, good to see you guys. Thank you so much.